phone lines on mute unless you have any questions, and you're also free to use the chat box to offer questions or suggestions as well. We would like this to be as interactive as possible, and we actually have quite a few scenarios where you'll be able to offer your opinions with poll questions, and if you have any questions about those responses or the what we would call the correct answers, please be sure to chime in, because most likely you're probably not the only person with that question. And then Leah Sewell from Therup, I believe, is on the line here. I see her there, and she will later on be talking about the GER, entering GERs, and answering some questions, and then also the GER resolution. So we will have her on board today and then presenting later on. We've invited the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit and then Kathy Lindquist with long-term services and supports, and neither opted to participate today since this is a lot more focused on how to categorize and what is reportable than some of our presentations in the past with a heavy emphasis on mandatory reporting. But if we have any questions throughout the session for either Paul Kramer or Kathy Lindquist, we will make sure to get the responses and share those with probably that same listserv that we share the invitation with, and then materials. Therup will be posting some of the information to their website under that South Dakota homepage, and that will be available in the next couple days or so. And then Dan Hoblick, our Communications Director for the Department of Human Services, will be sharing most of these handouts as well to the South Dakota homepage, or the South Dakota DDD homepage, and so those will be on there in about a week or so, barring any updates to any of the materials that we are going to be presenting on today. So with that being said, we can go ahead and get started. With critical incident reporting, the administrative rule is listed here for reference, really looking for that verbal notice of any critical incident report no later than the end of the division's next working day from when the provider becomes aware of the incident, and also looking for that written incident report within 7 calendar days using our online reporting system, which is Therup. And here's some information on how the timeliness of critical incident reports is assessed. So you have, these are little snippets from the GERs. So the basic information there has the event date and the report date. The report date might not align exactly with the event date, and that's okay as long as it's within those 7 days. But your event date really outlines exactly when the incident occurred. And then in the next slide is the DD notification section, and that needs to appear in all GERs under the notifications. You would have the date and time for when you reached out to the division, and as outlined on the previous slide, what you enter here, we would also make sure is what we have in our records upon receiving the verbal notification. At the bottom here is information on how we look at that written date and capture that, because most GERs aren't visible to division staff unless it's approved, and so with the approval date really is the same as our, I just wanted to make sure we're recording here, and we are, as the making sure we have that written date within 7 days. Some general CIR information. Again, we only look at the GERs that are marked as high. So if you have a reportable CIR and are sharing access to your Therup system with the division, make sure it's of a high severity level. Otherwise, we would not be seeing it, looking forward, anything like that. Also, there are witness boxes within the GERs, and we have opted not to use those because they tend to delay the submission of GERs, because they require responses from those witnesses or components to be added in before you can submit and approve that report. So just opting not to use the witness boxes. And then also all A&E allegations, each critical incident report requires a GER resolution, and that must be completed within 7 days of the verbal report to the division. Same with the written timeline for the CIR written report. The reporting responsibility, here is a flow chart, and I'm going to present my desktop because I know it's pretty small there. And I think there's someone who doesn't have their line on mute. If you want to check that, we just heard a little kind of clatter in the background. Could you make a note about changing the date on the bottom of the presentation again? I did it too. Okay, here's the responsibilities flow chart. And this is something brand new that we are rolling out. We had in the previous version of the CIR guide 8 or 9 scenarios to help identify which entity would be responsible for reporting critical incident reports as they arise in relation to having conflict-free case management and community support providers. And so we developed this, and really I'll just walk through it with you all, but it should resolve kind of our questions on who should enter them and who shouldn't. And again, as a reminder, the vast majority of critical incident reports will be entered by the community support provider. So when an incident occurs, if and only if the person receives case management only, no direct supports from a CSP, then the case manager performs all aspects of CIR reporting. That's only if they absolutely only receive case management. And then when the incident occurs, if they are not case management only, the participant receives both community support and case management support, then you would follow this next layer here. So whether the incident is observed by a community support provider, observed by a case manager, discovered by a CSP, or the CSP is notified, or if it's discovered by a case manager and the CM notified. So again, that should encompass every critical incident report. I'll start with the middle here. So this is really where it should help differentiate between the two. So if there's an A&E allegation with the CSP or any other entity, so family member, community member, medical professional, as the perpetrator of A&E, so anyone other than the case manager, the CSP does the mandatory reporting, does the verbal reporting and written reporting to the division, any reporting responsibility to parents, guardians, etc. Also lets the case manager know, and then completes the GER resolution and then the investigation, which go hand in hand within 7 days of the incident. So that's for the CSP, completes all of that if anyone other than the case manager essentially is the perpetrator. So here we go to the next section. So here is the very rare instances we would hope where the case manager would be the reported perpetrator. So only if the case manager is accused of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, not suspects it, but it's the case manager or their organization themselves allegedly who committed the A&E. So then the case manager mandatory report, they do the verbal report, written report, all notifications to the division, the CSP, parent, and guardian. And then the case manager completes the GER resolution and investigation within 7 days of the incident. And so kind of an example of what I could see there is if a participant was in a meeting, because obviously case managers don't perform direct supports. Maybe they're in a meeting with their case manager, and later on the participant alleges that the case manager hit them, or scratched them, or stole their wallet, something like that. And then the examples of CSPs, it's a full array of options for what could occur there, like I said, because the community or anyone else could be the perpetrators. And then I just want to, I'm not exactly sure, there's some just clatter and kind of like a ruckus in the background here, and so if you're on your phone, just please make sure that it's on mute. And then also if you're connected through both a tablet or a computer and your phone, make sure that both are muted, please. It's just right now. I heard a little bit of a rustle right now, so maybe if you just kind of moved about, please put yourself on mute.
Can you hear us talking right now?
Yes.
Okay. We're trying to put it on mute, but it won't. I'm going to try one more time here.
Okay.
Can you hear us talking now?
Yes. Is it *6 or #6? *6.
How about now?
Okay, I heard it for a second, but now it's done. So very good. Good job. Thank you for doing that. So then back, following the flowchart, so we have the A&E instances towards the center and the right here, but then all other incidents, so really every other potential critical incident report, the CSP would report verbally and written, and then make sure parent, guardian, whomever is aware based on the status and age of the participant. So I hope that this kind of demonstrates, again, that most all CIRs will be entered by the CSP. Okay, I am going to present the PowerPoint again. It'll just take a couple seconds to pop back up. Okay, and then that is one of the documents. The flowchart is one that will be shared out on web platforms for further reference. Here's our incident mapping, and this has not been updated since the first initial version rolled out. It was still relevant, and it is I think 4-page document. Still exists on the Therap South Dakota page, and then on our website as well. So there's no changes made to that. I know it's likely probably a little bit difficult to read through here, but since maybe I will pull it up and just present the actual PDF of it for readability here. Okay, so it's still coming up. There we go. So here's the South Dakota Incident Mapping document, and essentially this was developed to help with our migration from our legacy incident reporting system. Many of you had been familiar with Launchpad, to help us walk through our Launchpad categories and move us into what's in GERs in the Therap system. So it just kind of is almost essentially a crosswalk between the two. So at the left we had the legacy South Dakota category incident titles, and again, you know, the mortality is fairly straightforward. And then you'll see, however, like when we get into some of these other sections, like life-threatening illnesses or injuries, we had several subcategories, and now you would start with entering a GER event for suicide attempt, for example, as other, and then you would click the next category as suicide and a subcategory as attempt. But we'll see this demonstrated if you have not yet had an opportunity to enter a critical incident report when Leah has her portion on entering GERs. And then, as always, at the bottom of any Therap page, there are many resources for help. And I myself have really gone through probably almost every GER kind of tutorial out there, and I found them very valuable. And it was a unique perspective, as on our end we do not enter those incident reports, and it's been about 5 years since I had worked with a community support provider and been employed with them to actually enter them as well. So it was a nice little refresher, and yeah, it's just enhanced perspective. So again, that is available to you as a resource also. I'm just going to peek at something here. Okay, I didn't want to get back to the presentation if the guidelines was next. So here we go. Here are the updated critical incident reporting guidelines. I did make some very minor changes to this earlier this month, like 2 days ago, but earlier this month. And so just made really just to highlight the most significant change. was to capture what we learned last year during the annual training, which was that all unplanned hospitalizations, let's try to highlight here. Well, all unplanned hospitalizations in the life-threatening illnesses or injuries section are now reportable. And I know we've provided some ongoing training related to that throughout the past year, but just to highlight that once again, and now to assure that it's captured in our guidelines documents a bit more clearly. And this was something that the nurses who work with the division really felt would be valuable, because there's so many different reasons, but any really unplanned hospitalization is of a serious nature, and if it was not, then the person would likely, be going home that same day. If it was like a wrist fracture or something more minor, but if a person breaks a hip, as an example, most likely they're going to be hospitalized, and then there's potential for further complications. And oftentimes, unplanned hospitalizations tie in with potential for nursing home placement or just having some concerns with continued support of a person. So that is why we would like those captured. To hop back over to the presentation here. It'll take a couple seconds to pull back up. Okay, so here's just a little snippet of what the guidelines document looks like. Again, that will also be on the website. The next portion really just walks through all of the different reportable areas that are outlined in the guidelines document. So we'll walk through each of those, and then the secondary slide for each category, such as the death category. The next slide will have some opportunities for interaction, and we really would like to see a lot of participation from each of you related to the responses in those polls that I'll pull up. So walking through the death information, okay, so each incident is a separate CIR. An example would be if there's a hospitalization for pneumonia for a participant on Monday, and then that person passes away on Wednesday. Two distinct event dates, so we would expect two separate reports. Only if the death occurs immediately, I should say following or during an incident, shall the report be one and the same. For example, a car accident which results in a mortality. If a person discharges services and then passes away, that's not a reportable event. We see some of these come in from time to time, I think probably several times a year, where a person discharges to hospice or to a nursing home or back home with family. So they end their services with CSP, and then they pass away at a later date. Even that very next day, still, that we would not require that to be reportable. And part of the reason why is because if in hospice or nursing homes, those deaths are captured there as well in those data sets, so it would be a duplicative. And then all unanticipated deaths are reported to Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Paul Kramer is the lead for that, and we typically send them the PDF of the GER. So anything you put into the GERs is what we would send them, along with any additional information. We do a mortality review, and this is conducted monthly by division nurses, and then quarterly the information is also sent to the South Dakota Developmental Center out of Redfield. There's a PA that looks at the information, kind of just a summary of the mortalities throughout that quarter, and make sure that there are no trends or areas that we or providers or anyone may have missed as far as necessity for follow-up. Okay, so here is, we have two scenarios. I'm going to pull them up here as poll questions. The first one would be James. So based on your past knowledge, what you know about critical incident reporting, and then also what we've talked about today thus far, please respond accordingly. Give, I don't know, a minute or so, a couple minutes to respond. So James is a person receiving support. While walking to work, he was hit by a car and admitted to the hospital. James experienced a head injury during the accident and passed away that same day, unfortunately. How many, or what response would be here? One critical incident report, two separate critical incident reports, that the situation is not reportable at all, or that a phone call only to DDD will suffice. And we have 86 participants, and on your screens, I see that you aren't able to see how many people have voted quite yet, but I can say that we have 33 responses thus far out of the 86. So we'd like to, again, encourage you all to, walk through these, and there will be a lot of them. They're rather plentiful, but they are, at least it beats just watching a typical PowerPoint, so I'll say that much. Okay, what we have so far is that 85% of respondents said that one critical incident report would be warranted, and 15% thought two separate CIRs would be appropriate. The response would be the one CIR, because it's that same day that James was hit by the car and then passed away. So one critical incident report would work for this scenario. Okay, the next one we have is Mary. I'll pull open her poll. Okay, during a visit with her parents, Mary had a prolonged seizure. She was taken to the hospital and hospitalized for several days. On that sixth day, she had another seizure and passed away. Would there be a single critical incident report to capture the mortality, two distinct CIRs, that it's not reportable until her death occurs, is another option. And we have 29 people so far. And I actually should identify that sometimes we have duplicate participants because we have the phone line and the web platform combined. So we have over half of attendees, so I guess I would say that that's pretty good. Whoever just joined the line, we have, just please get yourselves on mute. We just can hear you and your actions over there. Okay. 2% said a single CIR for death would be appropriate. 93% said two distinct CIRs. And 4% said not reportable until death occurs. So the reason why it would be reportable right away is because Mary was hospitalized, and I know that it's kind of like a skills building piece, so as we later on talk more about hospitalization, unplanned hospitalization, I think that would be more apparent, but it would be reportable that very first day that she was admitted to the hospital with the prolonged seizure, as the guidelines lay out, like I just mentioned, and then later we'll talk about that too. So, but definitely two distinct CIRs for the duration of time that passed between her admission to the hospital and then her mortality. Okay, we'll present a PowerPoint again. We're just kind of wrestling around. That phone is still on mute, so if you could go ahead and mute that. Okay, the next section we have would be life-threatening illnesses or injuries. In this area, we capture suicide attempt, which also includes any threat where there is a plan of how to complete suicide. That would be considered a requirement for reporting, and also to be kind of an attempt to align with our guidelines. But in THERAP, it also allows you the ability to further distinguish between threat or attempt in one of our subcategories. Unplanned hospitalization is another area underneath life-threatening illnesses or injuries. And as I mentioned, new in 2017, all unplanned hospitalizations are reportable. However, routine or planned hospitalizations are not. So some examples here. Reportable would be an emergency appendectomy or a cardiac hospitalization, which was unplanned. Examples of what would not be reportable is a planned surgery, get that close such as your knee or gallbladder surgery, and then like a hospitalization if a participant gave birth. That one I understand is a little bit gray because you don't exactly know when it's going to occur, but yet we know that eventually they're going to likely be hospitalized when they have their child. So that would not be reportable. Any life-threatening medical diagnosis is reportable. And then there's just kind of a catch-all for others. Choking incidents with medical follow-up, victims of altercations may result in severe injury, head injury with loss of consciousness, etc. So kind of just a catch-all of anything life-threatening illnesses or injuries. All right, we have some scenarios here. I'm going to start with John. Okay. John called his DSP and reported that he had a knife and that he wanted to end his life. So some options for response here is that it's not reportable, he didn't cut himself. Staff didn't think he was serious, so again, not reportable. That it would be reportable as a suicide attempt, and then you would select the option threat as a subcategory. Or that maybe we can just monitor for 48 hours to see if anything happens before we report. I would say that resoundingly, folks picked that it's reportable as a suicide attempt and then to select threat. So very good. We are at 100% with that response category. So that is exciting to see. All right, after John is Patricia. All right, Patricia was upset over a relationship ending, and she called her case manager saying that she just wanted to die. Case manager asked questions further, and Patricia really didn't have a plan for suicide. So how would we capture this area, or this incident? Would it be reportable as a suicide threat? Case manager determined it not reportable, or maybe the case manager called mom and guardian and said, oh, not to take it seriously, so nothing else was done. And in this instance, Patricia receives case management only. Just waiting for a couple more responses to trickle in. Right now we are at suicide threat at 12%, not reportable at 79%, and the phone call to mom guardian at 9%. So it would truly be that a case manager determined it not to be reportable, and to discuss a little bit more about the rationale as to why is because Patricia didn't have a plan. That's the component, and likely she was reaching out, asking for emotional help, but didn't have a plan as far as I'm going to wheel my wheelchair into a busy street, or I'm going to hang myself with a piece of rope or anything like that. So if she didn't have a plan, it was just an area that you could reach out to assist her and make sure she has the support to have good mental health and not continue to feel down and out, which could worsen the status. So again, in this instance, as there is no plan, it would be not reportable. We have Robert next. All right, shifting gears a bit. While Robert was working, he fell down a flight of stairs, fractured both ankles, and hit his head. He was hospitalized for monitoring. Would this situation be reportable only if he was transported by the ambulance? Not reportable. It's not life-threatening. He's gonna pull through. He wasn't in ICU, so it's not reportable. Or since he was hospitalized and admitted to the hospital, that it would be reportable. Right, so far so good. Looks like 100% of folks feel like since he was hospitalized, it would be reportable. So very good. Who's next? Jennifer? All right, thanks, Beth. All right, scenario about Jennifer. Jennifer made an educated decision to have a breast reduction surgery, and she's going in for said surgery tomorrow. Is this going to be reportable as she will stay in the hospital for 2 nights? It's a planned procedure, not reportable. Or is it reportable due to the fact that she has a guardian? Okay. We have about 40 responses thus far. In this case, it was a planned procedure, so it's not reportable. We know that she's going in for this surgery, so it's not an unplanned hospitalization. There's definitely still some risks to any surgery, but her team knew this was happening, and so it would not meet critical incident reporting guidelines for a required area to be entered. So if 95% planned procedure, 5% still reportable. Okay, who's next after Jennifer? Michael. Thank you. And if anyone's interested while I'm pulling all these names, I got every name from the top, I think, 1,000 or top 100 Social Security reported names. So I just thought I'd offer that as a tidbit. Saves me from making them up and or using Christmas theme names. I could have done that. Kris Kringle and
Dasher.
Okay, Michael has been diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. Would this not be reportable? Michael hasn't entered the hospital. Report only when he passes away. Or would this be reportable as a life-threatening diagnosis? May also require multiple CIRs as his illness progresses. We have about 30 responses so far. This one is a little tricky. We worked hard on developing these scenarios and these responses, and we appreciate this one's a little bit more difficult. So in this situation, we have 78% of respondents saying that it is reportable as a life-threatening diagnosis, which is correct. End-stage renal disease is, pretty significant, and so it would be reportable. 5%, and when I read through these, sometimes the numbers bounce around as I say the right answer. So if my math doesn't quite add up to 100, it wouldn't because I can't do math, but it changes when the responses are read. So right now, 5% say it's not reportable. Michael hasn't entered the hospital. 5% to report only when he passes away, and then 8% multiple CIRs as his illness progresses. So I understand why that multiple CIRs might be captured, but what we would typically want would be one incident report for the end-stage renal disease diagnosis, and then follow-up to that same report in like the bottom comment section of the GER, and this would prevent duplicate CIRs along the way. However, I do see as I'm talking through it that if he does pass away, that it could also be another incident report at that point in time. So I'll give you that much. But yeah, so it is reportable as a life-threatening diagnosis. And I go one more in this area, Elizabeth. Okay. During a visit to her favorite restaurant, Elizabeth began choking on a piece of steak and was transported to the ER by her family. Would this be not reportable? The family took the initiative to take her there. Not reportable because the CSP and case manager weren't at all involved. Or would it be reportable upon notification to the CSP? Or was it not life-threatening? She wasn't hospitalized, so not reportable. I think in this instance it's helpful to refer back to your guidelines, especially when you have very unique situations like this that you don't often see. And at times participants do choke on, like a hot dog or a carrot or something, but it's, usual that they would have their airway cleared and not require any medical attention. In this case, however, 77% of the people who feel it would be reportable upon notification are right, because she did receive that medical attention. She may or may have needed it or may not have needed it, but if the family assisted her there, she still had that medical attention as a result of her incident of choking. And so again, even if it wasn't life-threatening and she wasn't hospitalized, like the 17% that chose that area, it would still be reportable per guidelines since she had that medical treatment. Okay. Go back to the PowerPoint. Does someone have a question? I think we have some noise on the line. If someone has a question, yeah, definitely feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we just hear a little bit of talking and some rustling on the line. And if there's any questions based on when we go through our scenarios, you can feel free to use that chat box too. Okay, now we're moving on to abuse and neglect and exploitation. Again, all allegations of possible abuse, neglect, exploitation are reportable. You can see the codified law outlined here for more defining information about abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And again, GER resolutions are required for all A&E reports. One of the questions that was received prior to the presentation was how would an organization do a GER resolution for an allegation of physical abuse by the parent or guardian that did not occur within their facility. And in that regard, the GER resolution would likely be very sparse. There wouldn't be a lot of information in there, but there could still be the pieces that was referred to law enforcement, referred to CPS or long-term services and supports, etc. And any of those preventative measures would still be in your GER resolution, such as providing additional training to participants on speaking out or self-defense or whatever, if they would choose to continue to go home to that type of setting. So there would still be value in completing the GER resolution. And then again, we'll see, we'll watch and observe Leah walk through one of those, and so if there's questions at that time, she would definitely be able to answer those with all of her knowledge. Allegations for participants who have a tendency to make frequent reports or attention-seeking reports are still reportable. So if a person, even if they often, essentially, for lack of better terms, but a very familiar phrase, would cry wolf quite often, it's still an allegation. And how do we know if this time, it truly did happen that she was sexually abused, for example? So, really need to do a due diligence every time that there is an allegation that comes through. And for those frequent folks who make allegations and it's unfounded and unsubstantiated time and time again, there's ways that training can be provided to those participants to really hopefully help stave off some of those if they're attention seeking or finding other ways to harness what they're thinking and feeling. Mandatory reporting is required per codified law, and there was also another question that came in which I referred to long-term services and supports, Cassie Lindquist, and she drafted up a response and also was forwarded to Paul Kramer, a lead of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, and he agreed with her information. So the question was, what is the state doing, essentially, I am paraphrasing, but what is the state doing to stave off having multiple reports, so a report to DDD for an allegation of A&E, and then also to either CPS or long-term services and support, because there's that duplication of reporting to both entities and sometimes also to law enforcement. And at this time, there are no efforts, to our knowledge, being made to reverse or change the codified law, and so all entities would just encourage you all to continue to follow the way that the codified law is outlined, and to continue to report as required, essentially. An allegation of exploitation and victim of theft do differ, and we'll walk through that in the scenarios a little bit. Exploitation is an intentional action a person is taken advantage of due to their disability or vulnerability. Most often that's financially. And then victim of theft is typically by a community member who wasn't targeting the person based on their disability or vulnerability status. So we can walk through these scenarios now. William, oh, thank you. William. All right. After spending the holiday with his aunt, William reported that his wallet was cleaned out and that his MP3 player was taken. He thinks his aunt took these items while he was on his visit with her. So in this scenario, would it be not reportable? He wasn't at his group home, not a CSP concern. William wasn't physically abused, so it's not reportable. Do we not need more information if permission was given? Or there we go, I knew I missed one. Is it reportable as an allegation of exploitation? We have about 38 respondents thus far. Okay, what we are seeing is that 91% of folks would say that this is reportable as an allegation of exploitation, and we would agree with that. And then there was 8% who felt that it was not reportable, and you need more information if permission was given. That would really be, you would glean that information from your investigation, and so any and all allegations we would like to be reported. You can definitely find those unsubstantiated or unfounded, but if there's an allegation, definitely have a critical incident report done for that. Okay, Linda is next. Okay, Linda had her car parked on the street. When she was outside in the morning, when she went outside in the morning, she found that fuel had been stolen. She lives in a typical apartment setting with a shared parking garage. So would this be reportable only if police were involved, not reportable as A&E, she's a victim of theft, rather than exploitation, or is it reportable only if, after the investigation, this is discovered she misplaced it? Let's just say that we had a different scenario at first, and we may have changed it a bit. So I don't know that she misplaced her fuel, but that's okay. All right. 30 responses. We see 73% of attendees on the webinar today, 75 say that it's not reportable as A&E, she's the victim of theft, and then 27% would report, would feel it's reportable only if the police were involved. In this instance, most likely the police contact would be made, but that is not a prerequisite for requiring a critical incident report. So since she's a victim of theft, you would capture that as a CIR. Just to kind of muddy the waters, because why not? But the incident we first had was about a participant who was at a bar setting, nightclub, and left her purse, and her purse was stolen. And we just felt that in that case, she potentially, based on, if she visibly had a disability or not, could have been a victim of exploitation versus just a victim of theft, like any of us could be. And so it's probable that any of us could have our purses stolen at a beverage establishment, but also it could have been exploitation in her case. So again, the rich discussion we had earlier today, so when you have situations that you're not entirely sure, reach out to your assigned program specialist and have that conversation. either way, both of you are going to walk away learning something, each other's perspective, and a better bond with that person for having the conversation. So, okay, guys. I have the peanut gallery here in the room. So, yeah, just definitely reach out and have a conversation. Okay, Barbara or David? Sorry, David. Okay, David went to the day setting and a bruise on the side of his arm was apparent. He claimed the morning DSP pushed him out of bed. Would this be not reportable? He hits himself all the time and blames staff. Reportable as an allegation of abuse, or since he couldn't identify the DSP by name, it's not reportable. We have 100% of respondents saying that it will be reportable as an allegation of abuse. Very, very good. Next is Barbara. I must have gone past Barbara here. There we go. All right, overnight staff went into Barbara's room. She was crying. Staff asked her what was wrong. She said she was hungry and that no one assisted her to get out of bed for lunch or supper. Just to elaborate, she has, likely some mobility needs here. Would this be reportable as an incident of neglect? Not reportable. Staff just took it upon themselves to try to teach her to be more independent, or the guardian said that if she wants to eat, she will get out of bed herself. So in this scenario, we had 96%, actually 94% of people feel this is reportable as an allegation of neglect, but unfortunately, actually, we had 2 respondents, or 6%, say that this is not reportable. Staff were trying to teach her to be more independent. There's probably a lot more going on if that were the case, but typically we would need to take this for face value, and it's an allegation of neglect. Not receiving proper nutrition is a serious situation, and so we would want that to be reportable. All right, Richard is up here. There we go. Okay, Richard has not been acting himself. Staff discussed what was going on, and he said that a neighbor had made him engage in sexual actions, but Richard didn't want to and tried to say no. Richard's neighbor is not receiving services, so this isn't reportable. Richard has made false allegations in the past, not reportable, but since he has made an allegation of A&E, in this case it would be reportable. All right, very good. 100% of people felt that an allegation of A&E, since it's been made, is reportable. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now, and we'll walk through a little bit more in relation to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. There we go. Okay, for A&E reporting, all allegations of A&E must be reported, whether the provider has determined the incident to be substantiated or not. And then again, the codified law with the requirement for the mandatory reporting, they have a 24-hour from the event date reporting requirement for timeliness. So evenings and weekends, if long-term services and supports or child protection with DSS was not open, you would need to contact your local law enforcement to make that report. But typically, especially during the week, you'd contact your local CPS office or LTSS office, and then Cassie Lindquist, if you have any additional questions, she's with long-term services and supports, and her contact information is captured here. She could also provide information on mandatory reporting if so desired. And she and I collaborate fairly closely. Probably a couple times a week we'll talk about some different incidents which have occurred, and she and I both work very closely with Paul Kramer with Medicaid fraud as well. So we all keep in close contact. With GER resolutions, we have a CIR guide, and I want to make sure that that link is updated and still working since there's been a new platform, I think, rolled out for GERs. So I just want to make sure that from this time last year when the guide was developed, actually mid-year this year when the guide was developed, that that's still active. But we'll make sure that's right on our final version of this. But also, again, GER resolutions must be completed for all A&E GERs, really to outline the investigation. In that area, substantiation information would be included. You'd include pieces of your investigation, different components, staff findings, etc. And then the GER resolution edit rule must be assigned to create GER resolutions. And we can talk with Leah more about that in a bit if there's questions about the role assigned. The providers, you are able to establish roles for your users. Okay, we'll get back into some of the different areas in the guide. Unless anyone has any questions about A&E, I think it's one of our top reporting categories. So if there's any questions, you can definitely take some time to answer those. Okay. Changes in health or behavior. So a change in health would be an inpatient psychiatric stay. Changes in behavior include the jeopardizing services or increase in behavior categories. Missing person. One note with missing persons is that there is an approved missing persons plan for a particular person, so a part of their plan, not just an organizational policy, but a part of an individual person's ISP plan that may not be reportable. But even if the missing persons plan is in place for a participant, an incident, there's some extenuating circumstances. If they're gone for a lengthy duration of time, or if there's maybe some illegal activity or suspicion of A&E, victimization, etc. going on, or if there's just a lot of different situations that might occur and go along with this, theft, etc. So if any of that happens, it might still be reportable even though there's a missing persons plan in place. So just give us a call and we'll have a conversation. And then also a perpetrator of a severe altercation or A&E would be captured in this area as well. More scenarios. Yes, we have a question here. Will the slideshow be emailed out to review if there are questions later on when reporting a GER? And yes, it has been sent out already just, I don't know, a couple hours ago or so now. And we'll make those final updates from what we have found in reviewing the document while presenting, and if there's any other questions that arise along the way. And we'll post that to the website most likely. I don't know that we'll necessarily respond all with an email unless we find along the way that there are certain areas that require some direct feedback and direct question responses that we wouldn't necessarily have a platform to post those on the website with. So, but they would all appear on the website within about a week, most likely. Okay, we're going to start with Susan. Susan was found disoriented in her church. The police department transported her to the emergency room to have her assessed for psychiatric treatment. However, she was not admitted. Would this be not reportable, as staff weren't with her, reportable as she was in the ER, reportable because the police were involved and were called, or not reportable as she was not admitted to the hospital? Kind of waiting a bit. We don't have a lot of responses quite yet. Okay, and they're actually they are fairly varied. So we'll walk through this a bit here. This 20% of people said that this is reportable as she was in the emergency room. 20% said reportable because the police were called, and 58% moved around again, not reportable as she was not admitted to the hospital. In this scenario, it would actually be not reportable as she was not admitted to the hospital. You know, her going into the emergency room, she wasn't admitted, and maybe it's just the brief scenario, it doesn't provide enough detail. But if someone goes into the emergency room but is not actually admitted for a hospitalization stay, that's not reportable. In this case, the police were involved. However, there was no illegal activity, and that's one of the most significant components of the police involvement is tied to the participant having some type of being accused of committing some type of crime. And so it would not be reportable as she was not admitted to the hospital. There might be other reporting areas that you might be thinking of reporting under, you know, such as changes in health and such, but wouldn't be required just on one instance of being disoriented at church. Okay, the next one we have is Jessica. All right, Jessica's team has noticed a trend in having more and more aggressive behavioral incidents, and then other housemates are starting to become worried about living with her if her behavioral instances worsen. So is this scenario not reportable? There's no injuries right now. Reportable for increased behaviors, or since no grievances have actually been filed, it's not reportable. Okay, we have 3% saying it's not reportable as there are no injuries at this time. If we're looking at it from an increase in behavior category, that's why we really wanted to capture it. So we see 89% of people saying it's reportable for increased behaviors, and then 9% saying as there's no grievances filed, it's not reportable. Individual organizations might have report or criteria or policies to help that organization determine if a situation should be reportable or not, which is fine. But in this instance, if an organization felt this should be reported, it would be for increased behaviors or jeopardizing services. They are a little bit interchangeable. All right, and then Margaret is our last one in this section. Or did I miss Joseph? Oh, I missed Joseph. We'll come back to Joseph. All right, Margaret made an allegation against Charles for touching her underneath her skirt while she was in the van heading to work. Is this reportable for both of them as A&E? So both Charles and Margaret would have A&E reports written for them. Reportable as sexual abuse if Margaret was affected by it. Reportable as an altercation with Charles as the perpetrator, or both B and C. Reportable sexual abuse for Margaret, and altercation with Charles as the perpetrator. Okay, what we really wanted to capture here is that we often see incident reports where the perpetrator is also has an A&E report written for them. So in this case, Charles would be the perpetrator, so his report would be an altercation, whereas Margaret would be the victim of A&E, so she would have the A&E report. So in this case, both B and C would be the most accurate. But we see 54% saying both B and C, and 32% saying both for A&E. So again, just if, so Charles is not the victim of abuse and neglect, he would be the perpetrator. So that's how we make that distinction on what type of report would be submitted. And then Joseph. All right, Joseph one evening was upset at his group home and completed some property damage. Police were called and he was assisted to the ER for a psychiatric assessment and was admitted for a short stay. Would this be a reportable hospitalization because he was admitted, not reportable because it's not life-threatening, or reportable only for that police involvement category? Okay, we see 100% of people responding that it is reportable hospitalization as he was admitted. Very good. Okay, we'll go back to the PowerPoint here. And next we're going to be talking, I believe, about serious medication errors. There we go. For medication errors are actually equates to a very small amount of reports in the grand scheme of critical incident reports for our system. Hold on a second. We have a question from attendees. Going back to the A&E scenario, a perp of altercation can be reported if there is no victim, since she may have not been affected, and that is very true. And in the sexual abuse, it's probably not the best example to portray that, but especially in like instances of physical abuse or verbal abuse, the participant may not have lasting side effects from the incident. You know, may have been just like, oh, you know, Joe hit me, that took place. However, the altercation still may have happened. So yes, there can be situations where there's an altercation only and not necessarily an A&E victim report, but we would want to typically have a conversation in those types of scenarios, and you would be well off to document the direction or suggestion provided by division staff about an A&E or there not being an A&E report. Most times we see they kind of go hand in hand. Okay. Serious medication errors. A medication error to be reportable to us at the division must result in emergency medical treatment, hospitalization, or death. Some medication errors can also be considered neglect. For an example, administration of medications not done, but this is well beyond just a missing dose or one time frame for a missing medication. Medication errors can be considered as exploitation. For example, missing medication from a locked medication box, but those medications such as stimulants or controlled substances. But those would not, so we can clarify this a little bit more too here, but those medication errors for exploitation would not be serious medication errors. Those would just be allegations of exploitation. So we'll clear that up here a bit on this PowerPoint. Oh, actually, it's right there. There we go. So that would those exploitation would not be a medication error CIR unless it would fit the above criteria, resulting in emergency medical treatment, hospitalization, or death. Okay, then we have just a couple scenarios here. These are pretty straightforward. We have 5 participants. There we go. So there are 5 participants leaving town on a staffed trip, but there are no medication boxes that accompany the folks on their trip. Would this be not reportable? They're their own guardians. Reportable as a serious medication error. Reportable only if side effects are experienced from not taking the medications, or not reportable as a serious med error, but likely as neglect. I should also add a bit to it that there was no emergency medical treatment, hospitalization, or death in this scenario. responses are fairly scattered. What we were really hoping to see here was the last section, or the last response, which is that this is not reportable as a serious medication error, but likely as neglect. It would, and that was 66% of people thought that. There were 23% that said it reportable as a serious medication error. There's no emergency medical treatment, hospitalization, or death. And it might not say that here, but just based on what I had shared. And then we have 13% only if side effects were experienced from not taking the medication. So I could see that also being why some folks would pick that. But really what we were looking for were not reportable as a medication error, but likely as neglect for not assuring that the medications were taken on an out-of-town trip. Okay, the next one we have is Christopher. We're getting through these. I mean, I think these are a lot of fun. So I appreciate everyone's interaction here, and yeah, I think we're learning a lot from these. Okay, Christopher received the wrong participant's medication and his blood pressure dropped. The on-call RN was called and he was transported to his primary care physician's office. Is this not reportable? No significant side effect. Not reportable, it was just an office visit. Or reportable as medical treatment was sought. Or both A and B. So this case, and then as the serious medication errors outline, it really would be what we were looking for was reportable as medical treatment was sought. Trying to find the slide without going back to it here to get the exact verbiage for the medical treatment in the guidelines. And actually, I have it up here. I'll just peek at it quick. So in the guidelines, serious medication error results in emergency medical treatment, hospitalization, or death. And so I could see with an office visit, but it was an unplanned office visit. And so really what we were looking for was medical treatment sought, and we have 91% of people responding that it would be reportable as there was medical treatment as a result of the med error. Okay, after Christopher, we have Sam. All right, staff note in narcotic accounts that 3 doses of a narcotic are missing during Sam's shift. So in this case, Sam is the staff person. So options here, is this reportable as a serious medication error? Is it reportable only as a victim of theft? Police were called, so we're kind of skill building here a little bit. Not reportable, internal med error forms were done. Not reportable until after an investigation concludes. Or is it reportable only as an allegation of exploitation? I don't have very many responses here. Maybe I'll just let that marinate for a few moments with you all. We have about 20 people responding thus far, and we've seen a lot more with most questions. Okay, the responses are 16% say it's a reportable serious medication error. In this case, it does not result in medical treatment, hospitalization, or death, so it is not a serious medication error. It is unlikely that the participant would be a victim of theft. Because we're looking at, in this case, as I pictured it, providing more context now, this would typically be like a group home type supervised setting. so in that case, we would expect it to be exploitation, as the perpetrator would typically be well aware that they're a vulnerable or potentially vulnerable participant. Not reportable internal medication error forms were done, that's 3%. Not reportable until after investigation, 6%. And then 70%, very good that you responded that it's reportable only as an allegation of exploitation. And that is the correct answer, so it's reportable for an allegation of exploitation. We would not want to wait until after the investigation is completed to have this be reportable, however, because again, any allegation we want reported. And then also, just doing your internal medication error forms would typically not suffice if we're looking at 3 doses of a narcotic. Oftentimes, and I have over 10 years of CSP experience prior to coming to the division, and I have seen where you get off on a narcotic count, 1 or 2 medications, depending on the frequency of administration of those. But when you're looking at, like 3 doses, most likely there is something a little fishy going on, technical term, fishy. And so you would want to at least alert that it could be a potential for exploitation. You may find later on, while you're completing your GER resolution through the course of your investigation, that it was not reportable, that the 3 pills fell out into the bottom of the med container, but let's get it reported, and we can always find it unsubstantiated. And again, the number of critical incident reports for an organization should not be used as a grading tool by any stretch. Incidents happen, CIRs occur, and so don't be afraid to report them, I should say. And we do, I guess Laura will be responsible here in the future for sharing, and has been actually sharing the information for the quarterly frequency of how often incident reports occur, and in what categories, and what provider. And I think there might be some changes in the future to possibly not have those tied to provider names directly. I'm not sure how that'll shake out, but we certainly don't want to have anyone be dissuaded from entering a CIR because of worrying about the numbers for that organization. Okay, the next one would be Karen, and Karen is the participant here. I have to breeze past Karen. There we go. All right, Karen. Karen learned the code for the locked medication boxes and ingested several other people's medications. She became pale, shaky, and then lost consciousness. The ambulance was called and she was hospitalized for 3 days. So given this scenario, would it not be reportable as she didn't pass away, a CIR for violation of policy on locked medications, reportable for medical treatment, or both B and C? And I should actually elaborate that option C would be reportable as a serious medication error due to medical treatment. We have 53% saying reportable for medical treatment and 47% saying both B and C. And I feel like the wording on this wasn't exactly right. So in this case, this is reportable because Karen was hospitalized and had ill effects of a medication error. I see why it would be a bit gray, though, because it isn't necessarily a medication error, rather for a violation of policy. But either way, I see that definitely we feel like it should be reportable, and I think that's what we would want to take away here. Is that this would be reportable due to the ill effects and hospitalization of this participant. Okay, back to the presentation. All right, we are to the illnesses and injuries from unsafe or unsanitary conditions section. This area would encompass fractures, dislocations, other severe injuries, and they have to be a result of an unsafe situation or unsanitary condition, but this must be within the scope of the provider or the person to control. So an example would be a group home setting with sidewalk ice, tall snow, a slippery floor, exposed wires, a broken Hoyer or lifting device being used, etc. What would not typically be reportable, and still may in some instances, but most typically for face value, what would not be reportable would be an incident where the setting is out of the control of the provider, such as a wet floor, ice, or broken step, but that would be a non-provider controlled setting, such as a restaurant or a store, and we'll see that demonstrated in our scenarios here shortly. And then neglect may also be appropriate in some instances, typically where our participant supports were not followed. We most often see that in inclement weather or in using broken machinery such as a Hoyer, which had been identified as needing maintenance or repair but was still utilized. Okay, so only 3 scenarios here, so we'll give these all of our all here. Anthony is the first one. There he is. We're plugging away at these. There's not a whole lot left. So Anthony was walking with staff assistants in front of the Walmart. The ice was too much and he fell, breaking his wrist. He was not hospitalized. So is this not reportable as he was in a community setting, a CIR for staff neglect, and staff should have caught him? It's reportable. We have 30 responses so far. We see that 90% of people responding say it's not reportable as it takes place in a community setting, and we would agree with that. That's where we were trying to go with it, the 91% actually now. There's 3% that say it would be a CIR for staff neglect, and I guess I have to kind of read into it a little bit here, but maybe because I authored the scenario, but they were offering assistance. Where we would most often see that is if the support reads that a participant, Anthony needs a walk along to help provide stable support for him while walking on ice, and if that's not performed, then it would be more neglectful. And then it dropped down to 0, which is good, but just the staff, would have caught him kind of thing. So yes, we definitely feel like it would not be reportable because it was in a community setting. And then, if there's any extenuating circumstances, we can certainly talk about those and determine reportability based on the actual event. I can't read that. Who's that? Betty. All right, Betty was working with staff in the kitchen. Another person began mopping the floor behind her, and Betty slipped, resulting in stitches to her forehead. There was no wet floor sign. In this case, the person mopping said they were sorry, not reportable. Reportable as a head injury, and medical treatment was sought. Reportable as it occurred in a group home setting, or both B and C. And we think of stitches and a potential head injury as, fairly severe in the grand scheme of injuries from unsafe conditions, and so we would look at that way. Okay, and it's split between about 50% each for, reportable as head injury, medical treatment sought, and then B and C. And the C, the reportable group home setting, was thrown in there because this was an area that typically the provider should have control over and, maybe provide some coaching or teaching or support to Betty or the other participant mopping to help prevent these types of situations from happening. So yes, it would be reportable. And then one more in this area. Okay, all people living in a group home were affected to varying degrees from salmonella poisoning, which was tied to improperly stored chicken, which staff prepared. So, what? Okay. So no, this is not a CIR. We can't do a consolidated CIR for one CIR for an entire group home. Reportable as an illness caused in a group home setting, an unsanitary condition. Not reportable because staff hadn't been trained on proper food storage, or not reportable because no one passed away as a result of the situation. I feel like we're fading fast. We only have a few more of these, but we have 28 responses thus far. 30, there we go. 30 was kind of my magic number for when, there we go, 33, perfect. Yes, 100% of the 34 respondents said that this would be reportable as an illness caused in a group home setting, an unsanitary condition, essentially. Okay, then on to the PowerPoint next. Yep. Okay. And we're trucking away here. I know we want to have time to offer Leah the demonstration portion here. Okay, so we have illegal activity is the next area. This would be where there's law enforcement involved, and the participant is the alleged perpetrator who completed or committed the offense. What is not reportable is when a crime is committed against a participant under this illegal activity category. It may certainly be reported in other areas, such the victim of sexual abuse, victim of theft, etc., as we talked about, but it is not illegal activity if it's completed against the participant. Some examples might include arrest, incarceration, criminal court appearances, probation, parole violation, charges of illegal drug use, shoplifting, etc. Routine traffic violations are not reportable, like the speeding warning I got last night. Law enforcement reminders or questioning are also not reportable. So for an example, if a participant's receiving a verbal reminder not to drink in public, that would not be reportable, even though there's that police involvement for a portion there. A couple scenarios. Sandra. Okay, Sandra noticed an aroma, or Sandra's DSP noticed an aroma of marijuana, it has a ring to it, in her apartment. The DSP took time to educate Sandra on the legality of marijuana usage in our state and to remind her of her tenant responsibilities as well. Is this not reportable? She wasn't caught in the act per se, just had the very identifiable aroma, or police were not involved, so not reportable. Not reportable, no admission from Sandra, or would it be reportable for illegal activity? I could actually see we probably missed a piece of our coming up with our responses. So what we would really want is that in this case it wouldn't be reportable, it would not be reportable to clarify. I think we probably missed kind of a ABC type of deal. In this case, there's no police involvement. There is no paraphernalia identified or visible, so we would not report it for illegal activity. Maybe reportable as an increased behavior, jeopardizing services type scenario. But in this case, since there were no charges actually filed, this would not be reportable in this situation. Sandra, then we have Paul. Okay, during a house party, Paul was cited with providing alcohol to minors and has an upcoming court date. Is it reportable for illegal activity? Not reportable, natural consequence. Reportable only if his sentencing includes jail time, or not reportable as Paul claims he didn't do it. I think, yeah, that people are pretty quick to respond to this one. Definitely reportable for illegal activity. Very good. Okay, Andrew. Okay, at a summer concert, Andrew was stopped by law enforcement for public urination. He was reminded of indecent exposure laws and was not cited. Police have the most discretion in when they charge or don't charge folks, and so in this case, is it reportable for indecent exposure? Not reportable as there were no public toilets available, or not reportable as there was no police report filed and no arrest. Really here, what we were looking for is what 90% of the folks chose, which is that it's not reportable as there's no police report filed and no arrest. Maybe if it is a potential for a behavioral concern, then it could be indecent exposure, but in this case it's not an illegal activity because there was no charges filed. Okay, we'll go back to the presentation here, kind of looking through it a bit. Now we're going to talk about highly restrictive techniques, physical restraint, mechanical, chemical, timeout. The administrative rule has more information for you and is referenced here. Techniques completed per plan, which have experienced the full due process, are not reportable. However, if an injury from a restraint occurs, it is reportable, even if the restraint was performed properly. Emergency restraints are reportable. Example, techniques used when a person is endangering oneself or others, or if it's a safety intervention not part of a plan. Highly restrictive techniques must be due process, even those emergency applications, and many times, most times, when provider organizations are calling into the division, we like to remind you all to assure that those see due process within time frames. And chemical restraints, pre-meds administered by medical professionals at an appointment are not reportable, but if CSP staff would administer lorazepam, for example, prior to a dental appointment, that should see due process. And then general anesthesia should see due process prior to utilization except in emergency situations. Okay, on to, we're ticking away on time here. What are the scenarios for George? Okay, presenting George. I think there's 4 more, I believe, so we can just like continue through these and give them our most valiant effort and get them done. George began hitting housemates with books off of the shelf. To protect George and others, staff applied a hands-down technique, though this was not in this plan. It's reportable as an increase in behavior only, not reportable, no injuries, not reportable because HRC was contacted and approved after the fact, or is it reportable as it was used but not in plan? And we see 100% of you all pretty quickly choosing that it's reportable because it was a restraint, not per plan. All right. Michelle. She was at Hoo-Hot. Michelle ran into that grilling area, and it appeared that she was going to get burned. So DSP staff grabbed her by her waist to pull her back for safety. Is it not reportable as it occurred in public? And plenty of witnesses. Reportable, staff kept her safe, even though it wasn't in her plan, or both A and B. Thank you, Amy. That is a very good...
You have another one.
Oh, there's 2 of them?
No. Scroll up.
Oh, scroll up. Not reportable, staff did the right thing. Well, that's true. No, Amy here offered that general anesthesia given at a hospital or clinic by hospital or clinical employees does not require due process. And thank you for pointing that out. If we can make note of that, we'll definitely update our guidelines document to reflect that. We just kind of carry them forward from year to year, and this is kind of my area of expertise, for lack of better words, and so I will make sure that that incorporates the most updated administrative rule. As far as the scenario for Michelle here, it is reportable. Staff kept her safe, even though it wasn't in her plan. That 76% of people responding, 13% felt it was not reportable, staff did the right thing, and while they did keep her safe, it would still be reportable because it was a restraint that wasn't in her plan. All right, Michelle. The next one here is Joshua. And then there's a question about communicable diseases, and yeah, we'll hit on that next. Thank you for mentioning it. MRSA, I believe, is only reportable if it's invasive, such as in the blood. But we can make note of that and ask the nurses to check that out. But I believe MRSA is on the reportable diseases list, but it's only if it's invasive. But we'll hop to that one in a bit here too. Josh was banging his head. Staff tried all least restrictive measures, but his mechanical device was applied, and this was part of his plan. It was done per plan. 92% of you all said it's not reportable, was part of his plan, and some of you said reportable as it was a mechanical device. Some organizations have policies which prohibit mechanical device application, and so in that case, your organization, you may have not had that in policy or plan, so then it would be reportable, but this was in Joshua's plan, and so in this case, it would be not reportable. And then the last one in this area was Emily, and then we just have two more with highly restricted measures. So I guess we do have two more after all. But while cleaning her room, Emily became upset and aggressed after a housemate. Staff followed Emily and performed a physical restraint, but in doing so inadvertently caused an abrasion from the rhinestone jewelry that staff was wearing on their wrist. This isn't reportable. Mom was not concerned about the severity. It is not reportable because first aid wasn't needed, both A and B, or was it reportable due to injury being received from the restraint? And we see pretty quickly here that, yeah, 100% of you all feel that this is reportable due to an injury from restraint. Reverting back to the PowerPoint presentation, the next area that we'll talk about is the communicable diseases. Thank you. There is a reportable diseases list, and that is available on the website. They are updated typically January of every year, and so usually our division nurses send those out to people. We've had a turnover in our nursing, so maybe we can make a note to make sure that that's sent out this year. But also it's on the website, so you can just search for reportable diseases South Dakota, and it'll pop up. So Jan will visit and make sure that MRSA is truly only reportable if it's invasive, such as in the bloodstream, but I'm pretty confident that that is accurate. But again, it takes a whole team here to make sure we are, following all of the rules and requirements, and we each have our areas of focus. So, oh, Cassie, there we go. See, what a team player. Look at that. Cassie says that is accurate. So MRSA is only reportable if it's in the blood. A couple scenarios here, and there's only two of them, and then we'll be done with the scenarios, I promise this time. Eric was experiencing some concerns of urination and was assisted to his physician's office, where it was determined that he had chlamydia. Is this not reportable, as he's in a consensual relationship? Not reportable. It's a natural consequence, and he had his training, some safe boundaries training, or not reportable as it's not life-threatening. Or could it be B, C, and D? Or A, reportable for the Department of Health. Look, it's you're all on the ball, 100% reportable for Department of Health. And then the last scenario, there was an outbreak of influenza A in a group home. 7 people total became ill. However, Shirley and Stefan were the only 2 who had lab-confirmed cases of influenza A. Is this reportable for all participants in the group home? Not reportable as there was no hospitalization, or is it reportable for only Shirley and Stefan? We have about 20 responses so far. But for the sake of time here, I think we ran a little bit longer with this portion than I anticipated. 75% feel it's reportable only for Shirley and Stefan, and so that is accurate, 77%. Shirley and Stefan were the only two with lab-confirmed cases, and per the reportable diseases information, that is what you want to go with. Quite often, however, especially in smaller, more close-knit communities or organizations who have a really close relationship with like medical professionals, they will treat all participants in a group home, regardless of if there are lab confirmations for all the other participants, because it's most likely, being in such close proximity, that the other folks have the influenza A diagnosis as well. But in this case, the only two who have the confirmed diagnoses of communicable diseases were Shirley and Stefan. I'll go back to the presentation here, and then I want to read, Kathy had made a comment here also, our division, one of our nurses, that invasive MRSA is defined as infections in normally sterile sites, such as the blood, cerebrospinal fluid, oh gosh, Kathy, urine, and internal organs. So any of those areas with MRSA would be reportable. Okay, we have those scenarios. And then there are other reportable incident areas as well, alleged instances of corporal punishment, seclusion, denial of food, other practices prohibited in codified law. And you can certainly look at them if interested. And then any other critical incident as required by the division. Sometimes situations occur that we don't necessarily plan for or don't fit into any of our existing criteria. And so that could still be reportable in those instances. So let's have a conversation about them and see where that takes us. Just one note here is that if there's not enough information provided within a GER, a program specialist may request the GER be deleted and re-entered, and the same also with the wrong category or even the wrong date. And so we really want you all to be very thorough and cautious, careful in what you are entering to make sure that the most appropriate categories are identified. And I think we've seen a lot less people reaching out with so many questions, but we're always willing and able to answer questions on proper categorization. Hopefully those guides that have been provided will work. We recommend printing those off or having them on your desktop for easy access. And then also, consistency is significant, and so the more consistency we can have in the incident reporting, the better able we are armed, I guess, to identify trends, needs for systemic changes, technical assistance, etc. So we just want to try to be most accurate. Okay, and then Sarah, if there's a little black box at the top, it should say something like take over presentation, take over presenting. And if you are still, there we go, able to walk us through a GER, and I know I ran over a bit more time than I wanted to, but we appreciate it. And then you should be able to, there's that little computer button at the bottom, that little monitor button, and if you click that, it'll say present desktop, and so then you can click that and you're able to present your desktop.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so what we're going to do is go in and we're going to go through a GER with the abuse, neglect, or exploitation indicated, so A&E type. So I am within a demo account for South Dakota. So all of the individuals within this account are fictitious. If there happens to be anyone that you know with these names, it's certainly by accident. We also use an algorithm, like you do, Ashley, with your PowerPoint names. So we aim to choose more anonymous people. And it is the season, so I'm going to go with Martin Christmas for my scenario here within the GER. So a few things I want to review with you about the GER that are more general, just about the features within the form before we get into completing a GER. I think I will take it back a step. I kind of forget sometimes that people may be new to this. We are looking at the individual tab of the dashboard. So from the individual tab, which is now dark blue once selected, I'm going to General Event Report and clicking on New. At that point, I will have access to programs based on my caseload assignment, which is assigned by an administrator at your agency. So it's strictly based on where I work and who I work with. So in my demo account, I'm going with the Coyote residence. And I am going to go with Martin, who's on the second page, Mr. Christmas. So the first thing I'd like to review is just kind of the different features again within the GER. If you look at the little eye icon, this is a very common icon that you'll see in various websites, including, of course, TheraP. And this is within our new user interface. If you've been using TheraP for some time, and this is just a refresher for you for the CIR, you may have witnessed the change that we went through in September from the old user interface to the new user interface. So what we have here is the eye icon, which indicates the form ID. The form ID is really a way to locate a GER without relaying any protected health information. So the form ID, everything that gets submitted within TheraP as far as saved, submitted, etc., once it's in the system and stored in the system, it will have that form ID. And that's utilized for things like notifications. So if someone is set up to receive notifications, they may get an email with that form ID. And again, it's a way to look up a specific form and not relay any protected health information. And then, of course, we have our time zone and who's working on the GER in the moment based on my login information. This little question mark icon is what we refer to as help or help topics. So within the help section, this is a little bit more general about the GER. But what we also have, we have a help section here and within this section of the GER. And what we've done is we've inserted information about the GER and the specific fields and sections, but also South Dakota specific resources, including those guidelines that Ashley has shared with all of you. We do have these posted on the South Dakota TheraP page, and the second one listed, the division guidelines, that has recently been updated, as Ashley indicated, so those updates will be reflected in just a few days within the help topics. But these resources have been available to South Dakota providers since the time of the interface, the new user interface for GER, right around the middle of September. So if you've been in the GER and you've been actively working in it, you may have seen these resources. These are great resources in my opinion, just because you can access your state-specific guidelines directly from the GER and not necessarily have to go to the South Dakota page. So if you click on this, it will open up in a new window as a PDF. I like to reference these a lot. If I were still working in the field, I certainly, and working in a provider agency, I certainly would reference this while filling out a high-level GER that's considered a CIR. So I want to make sure that everything is labeled accordingly. I know that Ashley also referenced this throughout the presentation and how the South Dakota category is referencing your legacy information. So it's all really mapped out for you, and it certainly helps the provider user go through and submit information as is required of you. Okay, so just that's a little bit of a tour around the GER. Next, what we're looking at, of course, is the basic information. So within the new user interface, we have the GER labeled really clearly. I've been a long-term user of the GER, and just my personal preference, I certainly like the changes. I think it's a little bit more intuitive for provider users. But that's, of course, something that we're moving to. So across TheraP. So next, what we see within basic information is the individual, the program, the site. So the next thing that we see is the event date. Anywhere you see a red asterisk, that indicates a required field. So if you attempt to submit or move forward within the GER and any of those required fields are left blank, you will get an error message in red and it will tell you what you need to fix. There's basically a series of checks and balances within the CIR system that prevent you as a user from submitting incomplete information, which is certainly helpful because I for one, would rather get it right the first time upon submission than have to have something sent back to me and do it time and again. So there are checks and balances throughout the GER that also will include matching up timeline as far as the event date, the report date, and any times that are indicated. So the event date, of course, is when the event happened. I have the ability in CIR to indicate that it happened on a prior date, and that perhaps it was reported to me today or it was reported on a different date. But again, the system is also going to check to make sure that if I indicate that someone received a support or treatment, it cannot be before the actual event date and time. So just keep all of that in mind. You may want to make sure that you, whether you're kind of jotting that down as you're filling out the GER or that you make a mental note to make sure that you are certainly adhering to those timelines and when the event occurred. So I could indicate the event date as yesterday and the report date as today. That is allowed. Reported by will default to my name because I'm logged in, and then my relationship to the individual. So I'm just assuming that in this scenario that I am staff. Okay, we do have contractor, family, individual, and other. So in most cases, the person that's submitting the report is a staff member on the person's team. Next in event basics is the type. And again, Ashley and I exchanged some information earlier, decided that we would go with an A&E type within this scenario. So what I'm going to do within that is choose other for my event type, but down at the lower part of the page is where I will indicate A&E. So next is the notification level, and because we're reviewing CIRs, I'm going to label this as high. The location, if it happened at the program, then I would indicate program. If it's unknown, then of course, I would choose that. If it doesn't fall within this list, then I would choose other. But we absolutely suggest any time that you choose one of these drop-downs, before you choose other, make sure that it doesn't fit within what is available to you within the drop-down fields, because that does factor into reporting at the provider level and at the state level. So you really want to make sure that you're using the options that are available to you as often as possible. If you were to choose other, you will be prompted to indicate in the other field and specify that. So in this scenario, I'm actually going to go with a family home visit because that's the scenario I came up with in advance. If I had the address, I would plug that in. Just bear with me here. So I'm going to keep that generic. Describe what happened before the event. So this is really like the antecedent, and what was going on in the environment, or in this scenario, I'm reporting something that was reported to me, but I may not know, exactly when it happened because it was at a family home visit. So I'm just going to go ahead with that. Okay. Okay, so next we get into the abuse, neglect, exploitation section. And as a submitter of the GER, I have access to this section. But based on my role at the agency, that may or may not be available to me once it's submitted, meaning that if I don't have access to abuse, neglect, exploitation type of GERs, and this GER is submitted, then I will not be able to see it once it's marked as A&E. And please just speak up if you have any questions about that, or send a chat. So in this scenario, if I were to choose abuse, I'm just going to go through each one so you see what the fields are. I would have to indicate the type of abuse. And these are my options. And this matches up pretty well with the mapping document. The document references the TheraP choices that you have within the GER. So I would choose one of those. Okay. If it were neglect, those are my options. And again, if it doesn't fit within the options provided on the list, I could choose other, but I will be prompted to specify. All right, I'm going to go with no for that. My scenario is financial exploitation. So I'm going to go with that, and it's listed right there. And then we're going to move forward to the next section of the GER. And I'm getting an error message. So I need to choose South Dakota because I'm typing in the address. If I had chosen the program address will be populated based on the information within TheraP, which is very handy. Okay, so I have some guidance here. It's just reminding me that this GER might contain unsaved changes. To ensure no information is lost, save the GER from the preview page. And that's again, it's just a nice reminder that there is no autosave in TheraP. You do have to intentionally save. Okay, so we're now on Section 2, Event Information. I still have the help resources here. It looks like those aren't plugged in, so I'll make sure that that gets done for each section of the South Dakota help topics. You do have it at the beginning, and you do have this one right here at the top. Okay, so event type, that's exploitation, is on the list within the other. And then the time. If I don't know the time that it happened because this occurred on a family home visit and it was reported to me by Martin, I can choose unknown. Again, that would only be selected in this type of a scenario if I don't know when it happened. And the event in this scenario was discovered because Martin reported it to me. I was not present. I did not observe it. And then the discovered date and time. So here we're going to go with, and I can't report after right now. I'm on Eastern time zone, so I can report up until 4:53 p.m. But I'm going to go with I'm going to say that he chatted with me at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And this isn't a required field. Okay, the specific location as it relates to the event is not a required field. Again, I don't know where that happened, other than a family home visit. So the summary is a required field. And this is where I'll just kind of summarize what was reported to me. And I'm used to referring to myself in the third person when working in the field. I don't know, it's that habit. I don't think I'll ever be able to break it. So just bear with me if that's not how you enter in information. I'm going to keep that error there. Okay, so you can see that I have a spelling error, and I'm just going to right-click, and that's off of my web browser. I'm using Google Chrome. Versions of Internet Explorer that you're likely to use have spell check built into them now. Older versions of IE don't, but those versions are not compatible with TheraP. So really any web browser that you're using that supports TheraP has that built in. I saw in the material that Ashley has provided to providers that witnesses is not to be utilized, so you wouldn't be using that. And that can be disabled in your account. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to move forward, and I have another error message. So this is cannot be later than current date and time. I think what's going on here is it's telling me I'm in my system is in Mountain Time, I'm on Eastern Time, so I just need to make that adjustment. So I'm going to go with 2:30 instead. But this gives me a good opportunity to show you how to adjust the times. If you can see that when I use the clock in Thera, it rounds to 5-minute increments. But if it was like 2:32, I certainly could do that. I can just type it in. And again, feel free to ask any questions if there's anything that you need clarity on in any of these sections of the GER. And Ashley, if you could let me know if anything pops up for questions. I'm not the most savvy Skype user. The only time I really use Skype is when I meet with your team. So I appreciate your help. Alrighty, so here we are in section 2. This is really my opportunity to review the information I've entered in so far. When I provide any type of training on the GER, I always like to just make sure that you're aware of the ability to review, and you can go into edit and open that up in full. We also have the preview option now within the new GER user interface, which is a great option to look at each section. If you're confident that everything's entered in correctly, you can just go ahead and move forward. Corrective actions taken is the next section, section 3. So this is really where I document the supports that I provided to Martin as his support staff. And I don't know if you get this touchy-feely in your GERs, but again, that's not necessarily a clinical term. I don't know how much you in general will need to document with that. Oftentimes, the provider will just document the supports that they provided. Okay, so forgive me if I'm a little too wordy. And we'll go ahead and indicate that I notified this staff. Okay. Plan of future corrective actions is generally a place where we can document any way to prevent this from happening in the future. And then we have notifications. You see here that there could be notifications as far as perimeters configured within the provider preferences within the provider account. So provider admin staff have the ability to indicate that for specific types of GERs as far as high, medium, or low, or A&E types, that certain entities should be notified. In this demo account, we don't have that configured, but that guidance certainly is helpful. And you'll see it in a shaded area that's this color, that kind of yellow shade. So I'm going to go ahead and indicate who I was in touch with regarding this. And in my scenario, the individual that requested or asked to borrow money wasn't the guardian. So it's not the same party. Okay, and I'm going to indicate, of course, the time that I notified that person. And it needs to be after the event, but before right now. And then I'm going to indicate how I notified that person. And then I will add more notifications as applicable. Okay, so if the standards are that I also need to notify another team member, then I'll go ahead and indicate that. Okay, so once I'm done with notifications, the last section that's completely optional is external attachments. And then I can go ahead and I can preview the GER. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
None thus far.
Okay, so again, this is my opportunity to just check the GER and to make sure that all the information I entered in is accurate. You see here within this section I have the edit option. T-notes are really kind of what I consider like electronic sticky notes. That might be appropriate if the GER is going to be sent back to the submitter. This could be utilized by the person that has the approval of the agency. They could indicate that something needs to be edited or added in, and they could send that back to the submitter, as I indicated. Okay. Another use that I could think of, an example of the T-notes being handy, is if you're sitting down to do a GER and you only have a few minutes and you just kind of want to make a note to yourself and save the GER, they can be deleted at any time. So if you were to save the GER and come back into it and edit that section, you can come in and use that as possibly a placeholder, or again any notes to yourself, and then delete them to pull them off as needed. So we have the event information section. Again, if I wanted to edit that, I could. And you'll note that if you go into a specific section to edit, what you'll see also is you'll be back to the next as an option to move forward. Or you can go to preview to look at the entire GER. Okay, and then we have the event other information that I've entered in. So really, as far as the comments, this is kind of like, here is kind of like the antecedent, what was going on in the environment before I learned of the event in this case. And then this is the more specifics about the event. And then the actions taken are the supports that I offered up. Okay, and then the person's notified. And I have the ability to add more notifications. That doesn't go away. It's still there as I'm previewing. And then the review and follow-up comments, this is really going to be checked off later on if I have those specific roles assigned to me. So I'll only see the ability to review the GER or follow up on it if that's part of my privileges. So at the bottom, at this point, I could either save that to keep it in draft form and continue to work on it, which is, again, always advised if you're getting called away from your desk, you're not done with the GER, you absolutely have to make sure that you save it because there is no autosave. Submitting it moves it forward from the submitter to the approver, and at that point it's kind of in queue. It's in queue for folks to review it and then to approve it. And then once it's approved, it is viewable, of course, at the oversight at the level. And then if I have the approval, I could do that. So typically it goes from submit. When I go ahead and submit, it's going to say this GER has A&E specified. It will only be accessible to users having the GER A&E privilege along with appropriate GER roles. So that's something that I discussed at the beginning of reviewing the GER. So if I'm aware of that, then I'm going to go ahead and click on yes. And then I'll get that form ID. So that's, again, the way that the form is identified within the system without relaying any protected health information. So at this point, back on the dashboard, we see the To-Do tab and the statuses that the GER could potentially be in, and also the prompts that are listed here are based on my role assignment. So if I have the review role, then I will be prompted to go in and review any GERs. And let's say there's multiple people at the agency level that need to review. They'll each have that review prompt. And then we also have the approve. And then follow-up can be done after the GER is approved. That's just a way to indicate the supports that were provided to the individual to address that incident and to decrease occurrences. So let's go in and review. Even though I wrote the GER, I still have to review it just based on my caseload assignment and based on my roles. So we see that T-note that I had created. These do get cleaned up when the GER is approved. The system will automatically delete them. Again, if I was a reviewer or approver, I don't know if anyone on the line is in that position, there is the option to return to submitter, and it will go back to them. So that's another example of where that T-note could be handy. If I'm just coming in to review it, then I'm going to check off that I have reviewed it and write any comments. And let's just pretend we have a team meeting scheduled already. Okay, so if I'm comfortable with that, if I'm just coming in to review it, I'm going to save. And again, it's strictly based on my role. And then once it's ready for approval, I'm going to go in and approve it. If I want to delete that, I can. That T-note. I'll see all of the reviewers' comments here. So when the person reviews it, those people that have that role assigned, that all gets recorded right here along with the date and time that they reviewed it. And again, it's 5:07 Eastern Time on my computer, but this account is in Mountain Time, so that's how it's recorded. Okay, so if I'm going to go ahead and approve, then I'll just go ahead and do that. And it's going to give me some guidance. It's going to say again about the A&E that if I don't have, or any, basically any users within the account that don't have that role, they won't be able to see it. There's a T-note on it, and it will be deleted upon approval. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So my count will move down as far as the review and approve. I do have another one. Oh, it just cleared off. At this point, it's approved, it's in the system, and if we need to do a GER resolution, which is part of your requirements, to go in and basically conduct an investigation on any A&E type GERs, what I'll do is I'll be working on the individual tab, and that's listed below General Event Report based on role assignments. That's also a super role, so it's right next to the General Event Report list of roles within super roles. If for any reason you don't see GER resolution within your set of super roles as options, then you would need to let one of us know. I do believe that that's enabled in each account within South Dakota, but we're always happy to address any instances of that if it comes up. So you should be able to just go in and assign those roles. What I think is kind of one of the easiest thing to do is to use the unaddressed GERs filter. So I'm going to see that any GERs that are within the account that don't have the resolution completed yet, that meet that level, we'll see right here that GERs approved in the last 15 days are shown here. If I need to go back further, if there's one that's not showing up, I could go into GER search and complete the resolution that way. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to select this one that we've been working on where exploitation was indicated. And this is where I'm going to document the investigation. So the date that it was open, the date closed, was it a critical event, is an investigation needed, the type of exploitation in this situation was financial, the findings, and any involved persons. So I have these categories. So I can certainly indicate each person. If I, based on standards, only need to indicate the perpetrator, then I can do that. We already see that this is about Martin. Okay. And then I have the ability to continue to document any other involved persons. While you're in this kind of edit mode, you have the ability to remove or minimize that. And then we have the investigation details, so the narrative, notes, staff actions, and there's 10,000 characters. That there's a 10,000 character limit for each box, so that really is a good amount of narrative that could be allowed there. You also have a section that indicates any recommendations that are being made, as well as supporting documents that can be uploaded. And then comments. So just be sure that when you're using these sections that you click on the Add button to add the comments. And when done with the resolution, go ahead and click on Save.
There is a question here. Do all high GERs disappear after they are approved? This information is what one of the case management providers use for quarterly reports.
So they don't necessarily disappear. If you're looking at, if you go to Therap's website at the bottom of your page, and you want to search for support material, you could search dashboard counts. So I'm typing in dashboard counts. That's going to give me that guide. And basically, the prompts on the to-do list will be present for 30 days with the exception of the general, basically what's listed here are exceptions. So within the general event report, the only exception that's not 30 days for a prompt is follow-up, which is 15 days. So if you are on your to-do tab, and like you saw with mine, my approve prompt went away because I don't have any more to approve. But I can still go to GER search either from to-do, and if I don't have any GERs within those statuses on appearing on the to-do tab, I can go to individual, and I can do a search. So if you've been out of the office for some time and it's been outside of that window, you haven't approved the GERs, they will fall off after 30 days, but you can go in and do a search. What I like to do when doing a search is keep it as broad as possible. It defaults to 2 weeks ago. But you can go back further. And I like to go and look at status. If you don't choose a status, then it's just going to look by all. So anytime I do a search in Therapy, I like to just keep it as broad. And of course, there aren't a lot in this demo account right now. Within that time frame, they're just the ones that I've been submitting. But you can see here the status, whether or not it's been approved. So although they may fall off the to-do tab, you still have access to them based on your roles.
I got lost here a second ago. I was trying to pull up a document, but Jan then wrote, when we do that, the high GERs do not show up, and that was like a question. Is that?
When you do a search, they don't show up?
I'm not sure. See if anything appears in the, oh yes, correct, yep.
Okay. If at any time you're thinking that something's not operating correctly, like if you're going in and doing a search and the highs absolutely should be showing up. One thing I would recommend, however, if you're looking at a list of GERs, only 15 will show up on this list, and you will have at the bottom, you'll have down here a prompt to go to the next page. So make sure you're not missing that. Maybe there's more than one page. The other thing that you can do is use any of these column headers to make sure that the highs are appearing on top. I only have highs in my system right now, but if you had high, medium, and lows, you can group them together by high, just based on clicking on NL. But you absolutely, I mean, if you have access to viewing GER and you're going and you're searching and you're not narrowing down your search perimeters, that's important, you should be seeing your GERs regardless of notification level. Again, unless you're choosing low or medium here. I like to just keep it really general. But if at any time things don't look right or you need a little bit of assistance, there's several resources that you can utilize. You can utilize live help. Okay, so that's great. You can click on live help and chat with one of our staff. If the button is green, that means that we have folks covering, which is about 18 hours a day. Okay, and this is just going to give the information as far as my name, where I'm coming from, basically. And this really helps our support staff so that if they need to, they can reference the South Dakota page and look up resources for you right from there. And that way they're a little bit more prepared to answer your questions and give you the best level of support possible. So in my scenario, I'm just telling them I'm demoing live help for South Dakota. Your scenario is it would be something like, not able to find GER, or you could just type in GER missing, something like that, so that, again, they can be prepared to answer your question. So I'm going to submit that. And it gives me information including how long I have to chat. Okay. But I could ask specific, or just state what my issue is. If at any time you're just not getting your question answered, or you're feeling like you need a little bit more clarity or anything, I would advise you be as specific as possible and let them know which TheraP module you're working on. So, for example, Catherine may not know what a CIR is because that's not really TheraP lingo. You really want to make sure that you're saying, GER. That would help us out a lot, and that way Catherine would understand. Okay, so once I'm done with my chat, I'm going to disconnect. That's one option for you to get help, right away if you're not able to find something. The other thing that you would also have available to you is My Issues. So we really take, of course, security very seriously. TheraP, of course, as an electronic health record, needs to make sure that we're adhering to all standards, practices for maintaining a secure environment and not relaying any protected health information in an unsecure way. So through My Issues, you are logged into your account. It's completely secure. We see it's a secure site. If you go in and you write feedback, you can indicate, so again, it's write feedback, and then you can indicate if there's a problem, question, suggestion, or comment. And this is where you could say, I'm not seeing high-level GERs in GER search, or whatever your issue is. And what this does is it allows staff to go in and look in your account, investigate that issue, and they always aim to replicate it first. And if they need more information, they will request it. So this is where you could, again, you can indicate. And what happens is it goes, I'm just going to indicate test for, and this way, when our team members know, they, or when they see it, they know that they don't need to respond to that. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and get submitted into our tracking system. And you, in your account, if you were to submit this feedback under My Issues, you would see that. You'd see what you've been, what you had submitted, and you would also see any response from our team members. But if you're really vague, our team will most likely have to ask you questions such as, do you have a date perimeter, or Is it all GERs? So any details that you're able to provide to us will certainly assist as far as speeding along the response and the resolution. Typically speaking, we'd want to know if you're looking at a date range, or if it's within one program, or if it's in all programs. So hopefully that helps. I would advise that you do that because it should not be occurring that you do a search and you're not able to see highs unless you have used those filters that we already reviewed. Back to GER resolution, the other thing that you'll see is you have the ability to go in and look at open resolutions. When I completed my test resolution, I indicated it was closed. And so here we see that some are still open. And then it could continue to be worked on. I don't want to give away any secrets there. Okay, any other questions from folks at this point?
We don't see any in the chat boxes here. Yeah, we can wait a couple seconds, see if anyone replies. Okay, I think that should be it for that piece. Did you, was that everything you were going to touch on?
It was. So the one last thing I want to show folks is, which you did touch on, is you can go to the South Dakota page if you're not familiar with that yet. If you go to TheraP, again, at the bottom of your page and click on website and then the TheraP homepage. And under states, we have state contracts, including South Dakota. And we have resources including recorded webinars. On the table for critical incident reports, we have those resources that are available directly within the GER in the Help Topics sections, but they're also posted here. So as things get updated, they get posted here as well.
Perfect. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. I will. I had a couple more slides. Let me see how to do that.
Okay, you're welcome. And just let me know if there are any questions that come up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate back to my PowerPoint here. But yeah, thank you. Definitely always valuable, and we appreciate your expertise. So. And then also thanks for all the folks for staying on the line. This is our last slide. I know we ran a bit late. Ideally, we probably should have allotted more time for this webinar compared to most of ours. But I just thought I would share, that all of our information will be posted. If there's any questions that arise, as you walk through the materials after they're submitted, or as you're thinking through things that we've learned from today, feel free to reach out to myself, Ashley Schluckemeyer-Okra. I should have introduced myself at the beginning. And then actually, I wanted to share Laura Ellenbecker and her mugshot appears here. She is our Quality Assurance Manager for the division, and this is a newly created position, and she will be doing a variety of roles, but one of those will be the Critical Incident Reporting Lead, and so it's a bit bittersweet. She will be taking over critical incident reports from me, and I think I've had those for a couple of years now. So she will be working on those. Just thought I'd put her contact information here, and then her picture also. If you happen to see her out at different events, feel free to stop and say hey and ask her all the tough questions. So but thank you all, and I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I can stay on the line for a bit longer in case anything comes up. Thanks to everyone for your participation. We'll get everything updated and posted in the very near future here.